Sometimes the things we need most desperately are hidden in the places we fear to look. The Phoenix sun had been merciless for 37 straight days, and Maya Rodriguez stood sweating in the shadeless parking lot of Desert Vista Storage, clutching the rusty key to Unit 247 like a lifeline. 6 months pregnant, evicted, and down to her last $27, she'd gambled everything on this 10 by 12 concrete box that some bank was auctioning off for unpaid fees. Maya had once been the forensic accountant who could trace dirty money through the most complex corporate mazes. But that life felt like someone else's story now. Today, she was just another desperate woman hoping to find something, anything, worth selling in a dead stranger's forgotten belongings. The metal door creaked open to reveal boxes, old furniture, and what looked like ordinary junk. But when her foot hit a section of flooring that felt wrong, hollow, Maya's old instincts kicked in. She'd built a career on finding what others wanted to keep hidden. Prying up those loose boards changed everything. Below lay a chamber filled with files, photographs, and a truth that made her blood run cold. Someone had been hunting women like her for decades, and now Maya held the evidence that could expose them, if she lived long enough to use it. But who else knew about this storage unit, and were they already watching her? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya's hands trembled as she stared into the hidden chamber beneath the storage unit floor. The Phoenix heat felt like nothing compared to the ice spreading through her veins. Scattered across the plywood bottom were manila folders, their edges yellowed with age, alongside newspaper clippings that seemed to flutter in the stifling air like dying moths. She lowered herself carefully to her knees, one hand instinctively protecting her belly. The baby had been kicking more frequently lately, as if sensing her stress. Not now, she thought. I need to think clearly. The first folder her fingers touched contained photocopied driver's licenses. Young women, all of them. Dark hair, brown eyes. They could have been her sisters. Each license bore a different name, different address, but the similarities were unmistakable. Maria Santos, age 24. Jennifer Morales, 23. Rosa Chen, 26. All from Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico. Maya's forensic training kicked in despite her shock. She pulled out her phone and started photographing everything, working methodically even as her heart hammered. The newspaper clippings were from the late 1990s, headlines screaming about missing persons cases that had gone cold. Pregnant woman vanishes from Phoenix Mall. Expectant mother disappears without trace. Family pleads for information in missing woman case. Her phone's battery indicator flashed red. 15%. Damn it. She'd forgotten to charge it the night before, too exhausted after her double shift at the warehouse, and too worried about the eviction notice to remember basic necessities. Working faster now, she flipped through financial records that made her accountant's mind race. Bank statements, wire transfers, payments made to something called Desert Rose Consulting, amounts that grew larger over time. Someone had been very careful about documentation, but not careful enough. Maya recognized the patterns immediately, money being moved, laundered, hidden behind shell companies. The metallic clang of a storage unit door somewhere in the facility made her freeze. She hadn't seen any other cars in the parking lot, but that didn't mean anything. Sound carried strangely in these corrugated metal buildings. Maya forced herself to keep working. At the bottom of the chamber lay a leather journal, its binding cracked with age. She opened it to find handwritten notes in cramped script, dates, times, locations, a hunting log. Her name wasn't there. The entries stopped in 1999, but the methodology was clear. Someone had been selecting targets based on specific criteria: young, pregnant, financially vulnerable, isolated. The baby kicked hard, and Maya winced. She was all of those things now. 6 months ago, she'd been living in a decent apartment in Tempe, working as a freelance forensic accountant, dating David, who'd seemed like everything she wanted in a partner. Then the recession hit harder than anyone expected. Clients stopped calling. David left when she told him about the pregnancy, his parting words still echoing in her memory. "I can't handle this responsibility right now." Right now. As if there would be a better time for an unplanned pregnancy. The warehouse job barely covered rent, and when the management company raised prices to push out long-term tenants for renovations, Maya found herself with nowhere to go. She'd blown through her savings trying to stay afloat, watching her bank balance drop like a stone. Another sound outside, footsteps on gravel. Maya's chest tightened. She grabbed the most important-looking documents and shoved them into her backpack, then carefully lowered the loose floorboards back into place. They didn't sit quite right now, but maybe no one would notice. The storage unit's main contents looked ordinary enough. Boxes of clothes, some electronics that might be worth something, furniture that had seen better days. Standard abandoned storage unit fare. She started pulling boxes toward the door, trying to look like any other auction winner sorting through their purchase. The footsteps had stopped. Maya peered around the corner of her unit and saw a man in a maintenance uniform checking locks on doors 3 units down. Tall, graying hair, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who belonged here. He glanced in her direction and nodded. "Hot one today," he called out. "Yeah," Maya managed, forcing a smile. Brutal. He continued his rounds, but something about his measured pace made her uneasy. When she'd arrived an hour ago, the facility had seemed deserted except for the front office where she'd signed paperwork. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Carmen, "Called your old number." "You okay?" Maya typed back quickly, moved. "We'll call later." She couldn't tell Carmen about this. Not yet. Carmen had her own problems, 3 kids and a husband who drank too much. Besides, what would Maya say? That she'd found evidence of murders that happened before she was even in college? That she was paranoid about a maintenance worker doing his job? The rational part of her mind insisted she was overreacting. Finding those documents had shaken her, made her see threats where none existed. The smart thing would be to report everything to the police and walk away. But Maya had learned the hard way that smart and desperate didn't always align. She watched the maintenance worker disappear around the corner before pulling her phone back out. Carmen's text glowed on the cracked screen. Her sister had been trying to reach her for days. Maya scrolled through the missed calls. Carmen, Carmen, unknown number, Carmen again. The unknown number made her stomach twist. Debt collectors had been relentless since she'd missed her last credit card payment. Maya typed, "Everything's fine. New place is good." The lie came easily now. She'd been telling versions of it for months, to herself, to Carmen, to anyone who asked how she was handling single motherhood. Fine was her default setting, even when everything was crumbling. The baby shifted, pressing against her ribs. Maya pressed back gently, a ritual that had become their private conversation. "We're okay," she whispered. "We're going to figure this out." She needed to get moving before the facility office closed. The paperwork required her to clear out the unit within 48 hours, and she couldn't afford the daily late fees. Maya grabbed a box labeled kitchen items and hefted it toward her 15-year-old Honda Civic. The car's air conditioning had died last month, another expense she couldn't handle, and the interior felt like an oven. As she loaded boxes, Maya's mind drifted to her old routine. 6 months ago, her biggest worry had been whether to upgrade her laptop or splurge on the expensive coffee beans at Trader Joe's. She'd wake up in her 1-bedroom apartment with the view of Tempe Town Lake, check emails over breakfast, spend the day analyzing financial records for law firms and insurance companies. Clean work, predictable work, work that paid enough for her to think about saving for a house someday. Now her routine involved setting 3 alarms because exhaustion made her oversleep, checking her bank balance obsessively, and calculating how long she could stretch a box of generic cereal. The warehouse job started at 6 a.m., which meant waking at 4:30 to account for the bus route from the weekly motel where she'd been staying. 12-hour shifts of scanning barcodes and moving inventory, her feet swelling in steel-toed boots that didn't quite fit. Maya's phone rang, Carmen again. She almost let it go to voicemail, but guilt won out. "Hey, Maya, thank God. I've been worried sick. Mom said you moved but wouldn't give me details. Maya winced. She'd asked their mother to keep the eviction private, but Isabella Rodriguez had never been good with secrets. I found a better place. Cheaper. That's great. Where? I can come help you unpack this weekend. The baby kicked as if responding to Carmen's voice. Her sister had always been the family favorite, the one who'd married her high school sweetheart, bought a house in Glendale, had 3 beautiful kids in neat 2-year intervals. Carmen's biggest rebellion had been painting her kitchen yellow instead of the safe beige Tony preferred. It's still pretty chaotic, Maya said, watching heat waves rise from the asphalt. Maybe in a few weeks? Maya. Carmen's voice shifted, taking on the tone she used with her children. What's really going on? Mom mentioned you've been working at some warehouse. What happened to your business? Maya closed her eyes. She could picture Carmen in her pristine kitchen, probably folding laundry while talking, life organized into manageable compartments. How could she explain that businesses built on discretionary spending were the first to die in a recession? That her clients had vanished one by one, leaving her with a leash she couldn't break, and bills that kept coming? Just diversifying, Maya said. The warehouse pays better than you'd think. Another lie. The warehouse paid $12 an hour with no benefits. Maya had run the numbers obsessively. She'd need to work 60-hour weeks just to afford a studio apartment in the worst part of Phoenix, assuming she could find a landlord willing to rent to someone 6 months pregnant with no references. Well, if you need anything, I don't. The words came out sharper than Maya intended. Sorry. I'm fine, really. Just tired. Carmen was quiet for a moment. The kids missed their tia Maya. Sophie's been asking when you're coming for dinner again. The ache in Maya's chest had nothing to do with the baby. She thought of her niece Sophie, 7 years old, with Carmen's easy smile and an obsession with dinosaurs. Maya used to take her to the Natural History Museum once a month, buying overpriced snacks in the gift shop and listening to Sophie's theories about whether T-Rex actually had feathers. Soon, Maya promised, though she wasn't sure how. Carmen's house was an hour by bus, and Maya couldn't afford the luxury of a day off. After hanging up, Maya sat in the stifling car and stared at the storage facility. The documents in her backpack felt like they were radiating heat. Part of her wanted to drive straight to the police station and hand everything over. Let someone else deal with 20-year-old mysteries. But the rational part of her brain, the part that had built a career on following money trails, whispered a different truth. Those documents might be worth something to the right person. Information was currency, and Maya was broker than she'd ever been in her life. Maya's phone buzzed against her leg, jolting her from the spiral of calculations running through her head. The caller ID made her blood freeze. Phoenix Police Department. Her first instinct was pure panic. Had someone seen her take the documents? Reported suspicious activity? But as she stared at the number, her forensic accountant training kicked in. The police didn't call criminals. They showed up. This was something else. Hello? Ms. Rodriguez? This is Detective Sarah Chen with Phoenix PD. I'm calling about a storage unit registered to your name, Unit 247 at Desert Vista Storage. Maya's mouth went dry. Yes? We received a complaint from facility management about unusual activity in your area today. A maintenance worker reported seeing someone removing items from beneath the unit floor. I need to ask, did you discover anything unusual during your clean-out? The documents in her backpack seemed to burn against her spine. Maya watched a dust devil spin across the empty lot, buying herself time to think. Detective Chen's voice was professional but not accusatory. Not yet. I found some old papers under loose floorboards, Maya said carefully. Looked like someone's personal records. I wasn't sure what to do with them. What kind of records? Maya closed her eyes. This was her chance to hand everything over, walk away clean, let the authorities handle whatever she'd stumbled into. Go back to scanning barcodes and counting down days until the baby arrived. Financial documents, mostly, some newspaper clippings. It looked like someone was researching something, but I didn't look too closely. Another lie, but a smaller one. Miss Rodriguez, I'm going to need you to bring those materials to the station. When would be convenient? Maya's grip tightened on the phone. Through her windshield, she could see the maintenance worker from earlier talking to a woman in a business suit near the facility office. Their body language was tense, purposeful, not casual conversation. Of course, Maya heard herself saying. I could come by tomorrow morning? I have to work tonight. That would be fine. Say 9 a.m. And, Miss Rodriguez, don't share those materials with anyone else until we've had a chance to review them. For your own safety. The line went dead, leaving Maya staring at her phone. For your own safety. The words echoed in her head as she watched the woman in the suit gesture toward Maya's unit. Both figures were too far away to make out clearly, but something about their coordination felt rehearsed. Maya started her car, the engine turning over reluctantly in the heat. As she drove toward the facility exit, her rearview mirror caught the maintenance worker walking directly to Unit 247, her unit, moving with purpose now, all pretense of casual rounds abandoned. At the traffic light, Maya pulled out the leather journal and flipped to a random page. The handwriting was precise, methodical. Subject exhibited standard patterns: financial stress, isolation, pregnancy at 24 weeks, recommended contact through social services front. Maria Santos shows optimal vulnerability markers. Maya's hands shook as she read the clinical assessment of Maria Santos, age 24, whose driver's license photo showed a young woman with Maya's cheekbones and her mother's eyes. The entry was dated 3 weeks before Maria's disappearance made the newspaper. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to meet. You found something that belongs to us. Desert Rose Cafe, Camelback Road, 1 hour. Come alone. Maya stared at the message until the car behind her honked. The light had turned green. She drove mechanically, her accountant's mind working through the implications. Desert Rose, the same name from the financial records. Someone had been monitoring the storage facility, watching for exactly this scenario. The baby kicked hard, as if protesting the adrenaline flooding Maya's system. She needed to think, but every option felt like a trap. Go to the police as planned? The detective's call had come suspiciously fast. Meet the mysterious texter? Obviously dangerous. Run? With $127 and nowhere to go? Maya pulled into a gas station parking lot and called the one person whose judgment she trusted completely. Carmen? I need you to listen carefully and not ask questions until I'm finished. Maya, what's wrong? You sound... I'm in trouble. Real trouble. If something happens to me, I need you to know about some documents I found. There's a safety deposit box at Wells Fargo on Indian School Road. Maya rattled off the box number she'd memorized years ago, originally meant for storing her business contracts. The key is taped under the spare tire in my car. If I don't call you by tomorrow night... Maya, you're scaring me. What kind of trouble? Maya watched a family pump gas 3 spaces over. Mother, father, toddler in a stroller. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that women like her could simply disappear without consequences. The kind where being poor and pregnant makes you invisible, Maya said quietly. I have to go. She hung up before Carmen could respond and stared at the text message. 1 hour. She could be there in 20 minutes, which gave her 40 minutes to decide whether she was brave enough or desperate enough to walk into whatever waited at Desert Rose Cafe. Maya sat in her car outside the gas station, watching the minutes tick by on her phone's cracked screen. 37 minutes until the meeting. 36. The numbers felt like a countdown to something she couldn't take back. Her forensic accountant mind kept circling through the same calculations, Detective Chen's call coming within hours of her discovery. The maintenance worker's sudden appearance, the text message mentioning Desert Rose, a name buried in financial records from 20 years ago. The coincidences stacked up like a house of cards, and Maya had always been good at spotting patterns, but recognizing a trap and knowing how to escape it were different skills entirely. She pulled out the leather journal again, forcing herself to read more entries. Each page detailed another woman's vulnerability with clinical precision. Sarah Mitchell, 22, evicted from apartment, no family support, pregnancy complications requiring expensive care. Jennifer Walsh, 19, aging out of foster system, unplanned pregnancy, boyfriend absent. Maya's hands trembled as she recognized herself in every profile. Young, pregnant, isolated, desperate. She thought about David's face when she'd told him about the baby, the way his expression had shuttered like someone pulling blinds against unwanted light. I can't handle this responsibility right now. He'd packed his things that night, leaving behind only a coffee mug with his university logo and the growing certainty that Maya was completely alone. The baby kicked, a gentle flutter that had become her anchor over the past few weeks. When everything else felt unstable, her job, her housing, her future, that small presence remained constant. Maya pressed her palm against her belly. "What do we do?" she whispered. Her phone showed 32 minutes now, enough time to drive to the police station instead of the cafe, hand over everything to Detective Chen, and hope the system would protect her better than it had protected Maria Santos or Jennifer Walsh or any of the other women whose lives had been reduced to newspaper headlines. But Maya remembered her own experience with systems designed to help. The social worker who'd barely looked up from her paperwork when Maya applied for assistance. The landlord who'd smiled sympathetically while explaining that eviction proceedings couldn't be delayed, pregnant or not. The warehouse supervisor who'd mentioned, casually, that morning sickness wasn't covered under their attendance policy. Being poor and pregnant hadn't made her invisible, it had made her inconvenient, and inconvenient people were easy to ignore when they disappeared. Maya started the car, then immediately turned it off again. The rational choice was obvious: drive to the police station. But 28 years of life had taught her that rational choices were luxuries she couldn't afford. When David left, the rational choice would have been to terminate the pregnancy and rebuild her career. When her clients disappeared, the rational choice would have been to find a stable job with benefits instead of clinging to her independence. She'd made the practical choice at every turn, and it had led her to this gas station parking lot with a backpack full of evidence and nowhere safe to go. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. "Call me back. I'm worried." Maya stared at the message, thinking about her sister's perfect kitchen with the yellow walls and family photos arranged just so. Carmen had never had to choose between groceries and gas money, never had to calculate whether she could afford prenatal vitamins, never had to weigh the cost of each decision against an ever-shrinking bank balance. Carmen's worry was genuine, but it came from a place of safety Maya couldn't access anymore. What would her sister say if Maya called back? "Come stay with us?" Tony barely tolerated Maya during family dinners when she'd been successful. He certainly wouldn't welcome a pregnant charity case disrupting his orderly household. Maya deleted the text without responding. 28 minutes now. The cafe was a 15-minute drive through downtown Phoenix, where the sidewalks shimmered with heat and homeless camps clustered under freeway overpasses. Maya had driven past those camps countless times, never imagining how quickly circumstances could change, how thin the line was between having problems and being a problem. She thought about the financial records in her backpack. Wire transfers, shell companies, money moved carefully through legitimate-looking channels. Someone had invested significant resources in tracking vulnerable women. The operation had infrastructure, longevity, planning. These weren't random crimes of opportunity, and now Maya knew about it. Her phone showed 26 minutes. She could still drive away, leave Phoenix entirely. Her Honda might make it to Tucson, maybe further if she was lucky. Start over somewhere else with nothing but the clothes in her back seat and whatever cash she could get for pawning her laptop. But running required resources she didn't have. Gas money, security deposits, job applications without references. The same mathematics that had trapped her in Phoenix would trap her anywhere else. Maya closed her eyes and felt the baby move again, a gentle reminder that she wasn't making this decision alone. Whatever waited at Desert Rose Cafe, facing it felt more honest than pretending she had any other choice. 24 minutes. She started the car. The Honda's air conditioning wheezed against the oppressive heat as Maya navigated through downtown Phoenix. Each traffic light felt like a deliberation. Red for stop, turn around, find another way, green for continue toward whatever waited at Desert Rose Cafe. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The backpack containing the documents sat in the passenger seat like a loaded weapon. Every few blocks, Maya caught herself glancing at it, as if the leather journal might somehow provide answers about what she should say when she arrived. But the journal only held other women's stories, other women's vulnerabilities catalogued with scientific precision, women who had trusted the wrong person and vanished into silence. 20 minutes until the meeting. The downtown streets blurred past, pawn shops with barred windows, check-cashing stores advertising fast loans, apartment buildings where air conditioning units dripped constantly onto cracked sidewalks. This was the Phoenix tourists never saw, the version that existed in the spaces between glossy resort brochures and retirement community advertisements. Maya had never paid attention to this landscape before. When she'd driven downtown for client meetings, she'd seen it as background scenery, something to pass through on her way to clean office buildings and expense account lunches. Now she recognized it as the geography of desperation, the ecosystem where vulnerable women disappeared without anyone powerful enough to demand answers. Her phone rang, Detective Chen calling back. Maya's finger hovered over the decline button. Once she answered, she'd have to maintain the lie about bringing the documents to the station tomorrow. Once she spoke to Chen again, she'd be committed to whatever deception she'd already started. She let it go to voicemail. 15 minutes now. Maya turned onto Camelback Road, watching the neighborhood gradually improve as she drove east. The check-cashing stores gave way to boutique coffee shops and yoga studios. Even desperation had geography, and apparently, meetings about 20-year-old conspiracies happened in nicer parts of town. The baby shifted position, pressing against Maya's ribs in a way that made breathing difficult. She wondered what kind of world she was bringing a child into, a world where women like her could be catalogued and tracked, where financial desperation made you a target instead of deserving of help. The thought made her angry, which felt better than the fear that had been her primary emotion for the past hour. Maya had built her career on following money trails, understanding how resources flowed through legitimate channels to hide illegitimate purposes. The documents in her backpack told a story she recognized, systematic exploitation disguised as bureaucratic process. Someone had created an infrastructure for finding vulnerable women, and that infrastructure required funding, coordination, planning. Whoever had texted her wasn't a lone predator acting on impulse. They were part of something bigger, something that had survived for decades because it targeted women society was already ignoring. 10 minutes. Maya pulled into a strip mall parking lot 2 blocks from the cafe and turned off the engine. In the sudden quiet, her heartbeat sounded unnaturally loud. She could still change her mind. Drive to the airport, buy a one-way ticket to anywhere with the last of her money, hope for the best. But hope wasn't a strategy, and Maya had always been practical above all else. Running would mean abandoning any chance of understanding what she'd discovered. More importantly, it would mean accepting that her life was worth so little that disappearing was preferable to fighting. She thought about the women in the journal, Maria Santos with her bright smile and trusting eyes, Jennifer Walsh, who looked barely old enough to drive, Sarah Mitchell, whose photo showed someone trying hard to look optimistic despite circumstances that offered little reason for hope. They had all faced similar choices, similar calculations about risk and survival. The difference was that Maya knew what she was walking into. Her phone buzzed with a text from the unknown number. Running late? We're waiting inside. Back corner booth. The casualness of the tone was somehow more frightening than outright threats would have been. Maya stared at the message, recognizing the psychology behind it. They wanted her to feel like she had some control, like this was a voluntary meeting between equals rather than a trap closing around someone who had discovered too much. Maya grabbed the backpack and stepped out of the car. The heat hit her like a physical blow, even in the early evening. Phoenix in summer was a city that punished exposure, that made survival dependent on access to shelter and air conditioning. Another layer of vulnerability for women with nowhere safe to go. She walked toward Desert Rose Cafe, each step taking her further from the relative safety of public anonymity and closer to whatever waited in that back corner booth. There was no going back now. Whatever happened in the next hour would determine whether Maya Rodriguez remained a woman with a dangerous secret or became another entry in someone's clinical journal. The cafe door stood open, air conditioning spilling out like a promise of temporary refuge. Maya stepped across the threshold. The cafe's interior was a study in manufactured comfort. Exposed brick walls lined with local artwork, mismatched vintage furniture that suggested quirky authenticity rather than actual age. The kind of place where young professionals met for first dates and book clubs discussed bestsellers over fair trade coffee. Maya's eyes swept the space, noting exits, sight lines, the position of other customers. Her forensic training had taught her to catalog details first, interpret them later. The back corner booth was occupied by two people, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun, and a younger man whose polo shirt and khakis screamed middle management. They looked like they could be discussing quarterly reports or planning a neighborhood barbecue. Nothing about their appearance suggested they were connected to decades of disappeared women. Maya approached slowly, the backpack heavy against her shoulder. The woman looked up first, offering a smile that reached her eyes but didn't quite mask the calculation behind them. "Maya, I'm Dr. Patricia Vance. Thank you for coming." The woman extended her hand in a gesture so normal it felt surreal. "This is my colleague, Michael Garrett. Please, sit." Maya remained standing, every instinct screaming against placing herself in a position where escape would be difficult. "I'd prefer to stand, thanks. You said I found something that belongs to you." "Documents from Storage Unit 247, Michael said. His voice carried the practiced neutrality of someone accustomed to delivering unpleasant news. "We understand you've already contacted the police." The statement landed like a physical blow. They knew about Detective Chen's call, which meant they were either monitoring police communications or had someone inside the department. Maya's grip tightened on the backpack strap. "I don't know what you're talking about." Dr. Vance's smile became more genuine. "Maya, your financial background makes you uniquely qualified to understand what you found. Those records represent 20 years of careful work that helps vulnerable women find resources and support during difficult transitions. Resources and support." Maya repeated the words slowly, tasting their bitterness. "Is that what you call it when women disappear?" "Disappear?" Michael's eyebrows rose in practiced confusion. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. We run a private social services organization. When our clients achieve stability, new housing, employment, family reunification, they naturally move on with their lives. What might look like disappearance is actually success." Maya felt the baby kick, a sharp reminder of her own vulnerability. These people spoke the language of helping professionals, but their presence here proved they were something else entirely. Legitimate social workers didn't track down whistleblowers in coffee shops. "Show me your credentials," Maya said. Dr. Vance reached into her purse and produced a business card. "Vance Family Services, comprehensive support for women in transition." Below that, an address Maya didn't recognize and a phone number with a local area code. "We've been operating in Phoenix for 15 years, Dr. Vance continued. "We provide housing assistance, job placement, medical care coordination, all completely legal and above board." Maya studied the card, noting the high-quality printing, the professional design. Someone had invested in creating credible cover identities. "And the storage unit?" "Belonged to our former director, Dr. James Whitmore. When he passed last year, we thought all his case files had been properly transferred. Imagine our surprise when the unit went to auction." Michael's tone suggested mild administrative inconvenience rather than alarm at losing evidence of criminal activity. Case files that include driver's licenses, copies for our records, standard procedure when clients lack other forms of identification. Dr. Vance leaned forward slightly. Maya, I understand this situation must feel overwhelming. You're facing your own challenges: housing insecurity, financial stress, pregnancy without adequate support. We can help with all of that. The offer hung in the air like bait on a hook. Maya's accountant mind automatically calculated the value: stable housing, prenatal care, financial assistance. Everything she desperately needed, offered by people who had spent decades perfecting their approach to vulnerable women. What would that help look like? Maya heard herself asking. Temporary housing while we help you find permanent solutions. Medical care through our network of providers. Job placement assistance once you're ready to return to work. Michael's voice took on the cadence of a well-rehearsed sales pitch. All we ask is that you allow us to retrieve Dr. Whitmore's files. They contain sensitive information about other clients, women who deserve privacy during their healing process. Maya looked around the cafe, noting how the other customers seemed to be maintaining careful distances from their corner booth. Had the space been cleared, intentionally, or was she becoming paranoid? And if I refuse? Dr. Vance's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the helpful social worker mask slipping to reveal something harder underneath. Then you'll continue facing an uncertain future as a single mother in one of the country's most expensive housing markets. With winter coming, that becomes increasingly dangerous. The threat was delivered with the same gentle concern Dr. Vance might use to discuss prenatal vitamins, but Maya heard it clearly. Accept their help and disappear voluntarily, or refuse and face the consequences of exposure and isolation. Maya realized she was looking at the sophisticated machinery behind the crude records in the storage unit. These people had learned from decades of experience how to make vulnerable women disappear while maintaining plausible deniability. I need time to think about it, Maya said. Of course, Dr. Vance said, her smile never wavering. This is a big decision. Take all the time you need. But even as she spoke, Maya caught Michael checking his watch, a subtle gesture that suggested time wasn't unlimited. The baby shifted again, and Maya pressed her free hand against her ribs, trying to ease the pressure. The movement didn't go unnoticed. When are you due? Dr. Vance asked, her voice taking on the warm tone of a concerned aunt. You're carrying beautifully, but I can see you're uncomfortable. The heat makes everything harder during pregnancy. Maya said nothing, but her silence felt like confirmation. These people had studied her type. Women pushed to the edge by circumstances beyond their control, women who had run out of safe choices. They knew exactly which pressure points to apply. 24 hours, Maya said finally. I'll call you tomorrow. Michael reached into his pocket and produced a cell phone, a disposable flip phone that looked like it belonged in 2005. This has our number programmed in. When you're ready to talk, just hit speed dial 1. Maya stared at the phone, recognizing it for what it was, a way to ensure their communications couldn't be traced through her regular service provider. She took it anyway, the plastic warm from Michael's pocket. Maya, Dr. Vance said, as Maya turned to leave, I want you to know that whatever you decide, we're rooting for you. Women like us have to stick together. The words followed Maya out of the cafe like smoke. Women like us, as if Dr. Vance had ever stood in a gas station bathroom calculating whether she could afford both prenatal vitamins and gas money. As if she understood what it meant to be 9 weeks pregnant with $127 to her name and nowhere safe to sleep. Outside, the evening heat wrapped around Maya like a fever. She walked quickly toward her car, hyper-aware of every person on the sidewalk, every vehicle that seemed to be moving too slowly. The flip phone felt heavy in her pocket, its weight disproportionate to its size. Back in the Honda, Maya locked the doors and sat for a moment, letting the encounter replay in her mind. Dr. Vance and Michael had been too polished, too prepared. They'd known about Detective Chen's call, which meant they had resources Maya couldn't begin to compete with. But they'd also been careful not to threaten her directly, maintaining the fiction that this was all legitimate social work. That restraint told Maya something important. They needed her cooperation. If they could simply take the documents by force, they would have. The fact that they were trying to convince her meant public exposure would damage them somehow. Maya pulled out her regular phone and scrolled to Detective Chen's number. Her thumb hovered over the call button for several seconds before she closed the phone without dialing. Whatever she told Chen would have to be the complete truth this time, about the documents, about the meeting, about the choice she was facing. Once she involved the police officially, there would be no going back to anonymity. But anonymity was already lost. The text message had proven that. Someone had been watching the storage facilities, tracking who bought which units. They'd found her before she'd found them. The flip phone buzzed against her leg, a text message on a device she'd owned for less than 10 minutes. Maya's blood chilled as she read, "Safe travels home. Drive carefully." They were watching her right now. Maya's eyes swept the cafe windows, the parking lot, the street beyond. A dozen places someone could be observing from, any number of ways they could be tracking her movements. The message was a demonstration of power disguised as concern. Maya started the car with hands that shook slightly. 24 hours, they'd said, but what was she supposed to do with that time? Research Vance Family Services? Try to verify their claims about legitimate social work? She was a former forensic accountant, not an investigator. Her skills involved following paper trails, not navigating threats from people who made other women disappear. As she drove through downtown Phoenix, Maya caught herself checking the rearview mirror obsessively. Every sedan could be following her. Every SUV with tinted windows could contain someone monitoring her route. The paranoia was exhausting, but so was the alternative of pretending she wasn't in danger. Carmen's house was only 20 minutes away. Maya could show up at her sister's door, explain everything, ask for help. But what would that accomplish besides putting Carmen's family at risk? If these people could track storage unit sales and monitor police communications, they could certainly identify Maya's relatives. The motel was out of the question now. If they'd been watching her this long, they knew where she'd been staying. Maya needed somewhere new, somewhere they wouldn't think to look. But Phoenix wasn't full of options for a pregnant woman with no money and increasingly dangerous secrets. Her phone rang, Carmen again. This time Maya answered. "Jesus, Maya, I've been worried sick. Where are you?" "I'm okay," Maya lied, pulling into a well-lit parking lot outside a 24-hour grocery store. "Just dealing with some stuff." "What kind of stuff?" "You sound scared." Maya closed her eyes. Carmen's familiar voice a lifeline in the chaos of the past few hours. Her sister had always been able to read her, even over the phone. "Carmen, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Has anyone contacted you about me recently? Anyone asking questions?" The silence stretched long enough that Maya wondered if the call had dropped. "Maya, you're scaring me. What's going on? Just answer the question, please." "No, no one's contacted me." "Should they have?" Carmen's voice rose with worry. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" Maya stared through the windshield at families emerging from the grocery store, arms full of normal purchases for normal lives. A father lifted a toddler into a cart while his pregnant wife laughed at something the child said. The scene felt like watching life through glass, close enough to see but impossible to touch. "I found something. Documents. About women who've gone missing." Maya's voice came out steadier than she felt. "And now the people responsible know I have them." "Missing women? Maya, what are you talking about? And why do you have—" Carmen stopped mid-sentence. "The storage unit. This is about that auction, isn't it?" 20 years' worth of records, Carmen. Photos, addresses, detailed notes about pregnant women in financial trouble. Women exactly like me. The words hung between them, their implications settling like sediment in water. Maya heard Carmen's sharp intake of breath, the sound of someone's worst fears being confirmed. "Where are you right now?" "Parking lot near 7th Street. I just came from meeting them." The people who want the documents back, they're calling themselves social workers, but Carmen, they knew things. They knew I'd called the police. They're watching me. Come here. Right now. We'll figure this out together. Maya felt tears she'd been holding back for hours finally spill over. The offer was everything she wanted: safety, family, someone else to share the burden of decision. But accepting meant dragging Carmen and her children into whatever came next. I can't. If they're monitoring me, showing up at your house puts you all at risk. They made it very clear they know how to make women disappear. So, what's your plan? Sleep in your car until they get bored and go away? Maya almost laughed at the absurdity. They gave me 24 hours to decide. Either I give them the documents and accept their help, or what? They didn't specify, but their help looks a lot like the last thing those other women experienced before they vanished. The flip phone buzzed against her leg again. Another message, still thinking it over. Remember, winter nights get cold for women with nowhere to go. Maya read it aloud to Carmen, whose response was a string of Spanish curses that would have made their grandmother blush. They're texting you threats now? Maya, this is insane. You have to call the police. With what evidence? I met with two people who claim to run a legitimate non-profit. They offered me social services and asked for documents they say belong to them. On paper, they've done nothing wrong. What about the missing women? Newspaper clippings and a journal that could be fiction for all I can prove. Even if Detective Chen believed me completely, what could she do? Arrest them for having a conversation in a coffee shop? Maya watched a security guard make his rounds through the parking lot, his presence both comforting and insufficient. The scope of what she'd discovered required resources she didn't have, investigations that could take months, connections between agencies that moved too slowly to protect her now. There has to be something, Carmen insisted. Some way to expose them without what? Without disappearing myself? Maya's voice cracked. Carmen, I'm 9 weeks pregnant with nowhere to live and barely enough money for gas. I'm exactly the kind of woman they target, because I'm exactly the kind of woman nobody looks for when she goes missing. The truth of it settled between them like a weight. Maya had built her career on understanding systems, following the logical flow of money and resources. She understood now that she was trapped in a system designed to eliminate women like her, women whose disappearance would be attributed to personal failure rather than predation. Come home, Carmen said quietly. We'll call the police together. We'll make them listen. Maya looked at the flip phone, knowing another message would come soon. The 24-hour clock was ticking, and every minute brought her closer to a choice that felt like no choice at all. Everything she'd learned about following paper trails and understanding financial systems hadn't prepared her for this moment, when the hunt had turned around and she'd become the quarry. I love you, Carmen. Tell the kids their aunt loves them too. Maya, don't you dare. Maya hung up and turned off the phone. Maya sat in the darkened parking lot, staring at the dead phone in her lap. The silence felt absolute, as if she'd just severed her last connection to the world that knew her name. Around her, the grocery store's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across empty shopping carts and scattered debris. But the brightness couldn't reach inside the Honda where she sat suspended between impossible choices. The flip phone buzzed again. Time's running short. Winter shelter beds fill up fast. Would hate for you to be caught in the cold. Maya's hands trembled as she set both phones on the passenger seat. They knew. Somehow they knew she'd just cut contact with Carmen, knew she was isolating herself exactly as they wanted. The message wasn't just a threat. It was confirmation that they'd been listening, watching, documenting her every move since long before she'd pried up those floorboards. She started the car and drove aimlessly through Phoenix's sprawling grid, muscle memory navigating while her mind spiraled through increasingly desperate scenarios. Every plan she constructed crumbled under scrutiny. Run, but where? With what money? Fight, but how? Against people with resources and connections she couldn't match. Hide. But they'd already proven nowhere was beyond their reach. The Honda's gas gauge hovered near empty, another reminder of how completely trapped she'd become. Maya pulled into a 24-hour station, feeding her last $20 bill into the pump while scanning faces under the harsh lights. The attendant behind bulletproof glass looked bored. Two teenagers shared chips and energy drinks by the air pump. A woman in scrubs filled up a sedan that had seen better years. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that predators moved among them, wearing the masks of helpers. Maya's phone, her real phone, rang as she replaced the gas cap. Carmen's name flashed on the screen, and Maya watched it ring through to voicemail, then ring again and again. She was still staring at the phone when it buzzed with a text. "Maya, please call me back. I'm sorry I pushed you to come here. We'll find another way. Don't give up." But Maya could feel herself giving up with every passing minute. The exhaustion went deeper than physical tiredness. It was the bone-deep weariness of a system stacked against her since birth, of doors that only opened for people with resources she'd never possessed. Dr. Vance had been right about one thing. Winter was coming, and pregnant women with nowhere to go didn't survive on stubbornness alone. The flip phone buzzed. 12 hours left. Dr. Vance is standing by to help with immediate housing and medical care. All you have to do is say yes. Maya typed back before she could stop herself. How many other women said yes? The response came immediately, the smart ones. The ones who understood that survival sometimes means accepting help from unexpected places. Maya's forensic accountant mind automatically dissected the phrasing. No denial, no protest of innocence, just a cold acknowledgement that this was about survival, and they held all the cards that mattered. She drove to the motel where she'd been staying, knowing it was pointless but needing to see her few possessions one more time. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a handful of cars belonging to people with nowhere better to go. Maya climbed the stairs to her second-floor room, keycard trembling in her hand. The door was already open. Maya's backpack lay dumped across the bed, its contents scattered like debris from an explosion. Her laptop was gone. The printed copies of financial records she'd hidden between her clothes, gone. Even the ultrasound photos she'd tucked into her wallet had been removed, leaving only her driver's license and $17 in cash. They'd been here while she was meeting them at the cafe. The conversation with Dr. Vance and Michael had been theater, keeping her occupied while someone else retrieved what they really wanted. The documents were already back in their possession. Maya sank onto the bed, surrounded by the violated remnants of her makeshift life. Her leverage was gone. Her evidence had vanished. Even the copies she'd planned to use as insurance had been taken by people who knew exactly what to look for and where to find it. The flip phone rang, an actual call this time. "Hello, Maya." Dr. Vance's voice carried a note of sympathetic regret. "I'm sorry it had to happen this way. We'd hoped you'd be reasonable about returning Dr. Whitmore's property voluntarily. You broke into my room. We retrieved stolen documents. What happens next depends entirely on your choices going forward." Maya closed her eyes, feeling the last of her fight drain away. "What do you want?" "The same thing we've always wanted. To help women in crisis find stability and peace. There's a car waiting downstairs to take you somewhere warm and safe. Prenatal care, nutritious meals, a clean bed, all the things you've been struggling to provide for yourself." Through the thin motel curtains, Maya could see headlights in the parking lot. A dark sedan that hadn't been there when she'd arrived. "And if I refuse, then you'll face the winter alone, with no evidence of any wrongdoing to protect you. Sometimes the best choice is the only choice, Maya. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The line went dead, leaving Maya alone with the sound of footsteps climbing the stairs. Maya backed against the far wall, her heart hammering as the footsteps approached. But instead of stopping at her door, they continued down the hallway, followed by the sound of a key turning in another lock. A guest returning to their room. Nothing more. The mundane reality of it struck her like a physical blow. She was so deep in their web of manipulation that every sound had become a threat, every shadow a potential predator. They didn't need to send someone after her. They'd already won by making her afraid of everything. Maya slumped onto the bed, surrounded by her scattered belongings. Her hands moved automatically, gathering clothes and shoving them back into her backpack, but her mind was elsewhere, processing what Dr. Vance had just revealed without meaning to. Dr. Whitmore's property? Not our property or the documents you found. Dr. Whitmore's property, specific, personal, as if the records belonged to one individual, not an organization. Maya's forensic training kicked in despite her exhaustion. In all her research on Vance Family Services, she'd never encountered anyone named Whitmore. Dr. Vance had been listed as the director, with Michael Chen as her assistant. But someone named Whitmore had created those meticulous records of missing women. Someone Dr. Vance spoke about with the kind of deference reserved for a superior. She pulled out her regular phone, ignoring the 17 missed calls from Carmen, and searched for Dr. Whitmore Phoenix. The results were frustratingly generic. Several doctors in the greater Phoenix area, none obviously connected to social services or women's shelters. She tried Dr. Whitmore Missing Women and got nothing relevant. Dr. Whitmore. 1990s Arizona produced a handful of academic papers and newspaper mentions, but nothing that matched the time frame or subject matter she needed. Then, she tried a different approach. Dr. Richard Whitmore, Psychology, Arizona. The first result made her blood run cold. Dr. Richard Whitmore, 67, pioneering researcher in behavioral psychology and crisis intervention, passed away last month after a brief illness. Dr. Whitmore spent his career studying what he termed vulnerable population dynamics, the psychological and social factors that make certain individuals susceptible to exploitation. His groundbreaking research in the 1990s. Maya's hands shook as she read further. Dr. Whitmore had been a respected academic whose specialty was understanding how predators identified and groomed victims. His research had been cited in law enforcement training materials, his theories used to develop protective protocols for at-risk populations. But the obituary, published just 3 weeks ago, contained another detail that made Maya's stomach clench. Dr. Whitmore's extensive research archives, including case studies spanning 3 decades, will be donated to the Vance Institute for Social Research, where his colleague Dr. Elizabeth Vance will continue his important work. Maya set down the phone, her mind reeling. Dr. Vance hadn't been lying about her credentials or her connection to legitimate research. She'd been Richard Whitmore's colleague, perhaps his protégé, but somewhere along the way she'd taken his research on predator behavior and used it for the opposite purpose, not to protect vulnerable women, but to hunt them more efficiently. The records Maya had found weren't the work of some basement-dwelling killer. They were the methodical documentation of someone who understood victim psychology at an academic level, who could predict exactly how a pregnant woman with no resources would respond to offers of help. Dr. Whitmore's research had been perverted into a blueprint for making women disappear. Maya thought about the missing women's files, the careful notation of their financial situations, their family relationships, their psychological vulnerabilities. It hadn't been random stalking. It had been scientific predation, each victim selected according to criteria that maximized the chances they wouldn't be missed or searched for effectively. And now Dr. Vance had inherited not just Whitmore's research, but apparently his methods. The woman downstairs in the dark sedan wasn't just offering shelter. She was continuing a decades-long pattern, using academic respectability as cover for systematic elimination of vulnerable women. Maya understood now why they'd been so confident about getting their documents back. Dr. Vance had legitimate credentials, institutional backing, probably grants and funding that made her untouchable to casual investigation. Even if Maya had managed to interest the police, what would they find? A respected researcher carrying on the work of her deceased mentor, offering social services to women in crisis. The flip phone buzzed, cars still waiting. Dr. Vance is a patient woman, but winter doesn't wait for anyone. Maya stared at the message, feeling the full weight of her situation settle around her like concrete. They had her trapped not just physically and financially, but intellectually. Dr. Vance understood exactly how desperate women made decisions under pressure because she'd spent years studying the process. Every move Maya might make had probably been anticipated, documented, planned for. She was facing someone who had turned the science of human vulnerability into an art form. But Maya had spent her career following money trails that people thought were impossible to trace. And now, finally, she understood what she was really hunting. Maya stared at the phone screen until her eyes burned, but her mind was finally moving with the clarity she'd been missing for days. Dr. Vance had made a critical error in mentioning Whitmore by name, and that single slip had revealed the true architecture of what Maya was facing. She wasn't dealing with random predators or even garden-variety serial killers. She was up against an academic machine, one with institutional backing, federal grant money, and decades of research into exactly how women like her could be made to disappear. But institutions left paper trails, always. Maya opened her laptop. They'd taken her printed documents but hadn't touched the computer, and began searching with renewed purpose. Not for Dr. Vance directly, but for the money. Grant databases, university funding records, research partnerships. If Vance was continuing Whitmore's work, someone was paying for it. The Whitmore Vance Institute for Social Research had received $2.3 million in federal funding over the past 5 years. Crisis intervention programs, studies on at-risk maternal populations, partnerships with women's shelters across the Southwest. On paper, it looked exactly like what Dr. Vance claimed: legitimate social work backed by serious money and academic credentials. But Maya knew how to read between the lines of financial documents. The funding patterns were wrong. Too much money flowing to field research with too little documentation of actual results. Payments to contractors whose business licenses led to dead ends. Facility rental agreements for properties that didn't seem to exist. She cross-referenced the Institute's contractor payments with missing persons reports from the past 5 years, mapping dates and locations. The correlation wasn't perfect. It was better than perfect. It was methodical. Payments to local contractors preceded clusters of disappearances by an average of 6 to 8 weeks, just enough time to establish local operations and identify targets. Maya's phone buzzed with another call from Carmen, and this time she answered. "Thank God." Carmen's voice was thick with relief. "I've been going crazy. Are you—" "Carmen, I need you to listen carefully. Do you still have contacts at the County Forensic Division?" "What?" "Maya, where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm safe, for now. But I need someone with access to federal databases. Someone who can run searches without leaving obvious footprints." Carmen was quiet for a moment. "You found something." "I found everything. The whole operation, the funding, the institutional cover. But I need verification from sources I can't access myself. Tell me what you need." Maya rattled off database searches, cross-references between federal grant recipients and missing persons cases, financial audits of the Whitmore Vance Institute. Carmen scribbled notes, asking clarifying questions with the precision of someone who understood exactly how evidence was built piece by piece. "This is going to take time," Carmen warned. "Maybe days to do it right." "I don't have days. They gave me until morning. Then we make time. Maya, come to my house. Bring everything you've found. We'll work on this together." Maya almost said yes. The temptation to share this burden was overwhelming, but she forced herself to think like the forensic accountant she used to be. "They're watching me. If I show up at your house, they'll know I'm building a case. Your contacts in forensics could be compromised before they even start looking. So what's your plan?" Maya looked around the violated motel room at her scattered belongings and her diminishing options. But for the first time in days, she felt like she had a plan that extended beyond simple survival. "I'm going to give them what they want." "Maya, no, not really. But I'm going to make them think I am. They want me to get in that car downstairs, to trust Dr. Vance with my life. They think they have me trapped because they've taken my evidence and isolated me from help, haven't they?" Maya smiled for the first time in hours. They took printed documents. They don't know about the digital copies I uploaded to a secure server before our meeting, and they definitely don't know I've figured out their funding structure. She explained her plan in broad strokes. Accept their offer of help. Let them take her to whatever facility they used for their research, but maintain contact through channels they wouldn't think to monitor. If she could document their operation from the inside while Carmen's contacts built a case from the outside, they might have enough to bring down the entire network. That's insane, Carmen said flatly. You're talking about walking into the same trap that killed 20 other women? Those women didn't know what they were walking into. I do. And unlike them, I'll have people on the outside who know exactly where I am and what to look for if I disappear. Maya stood up, shoving the last of her belongings into her backpack. The fear was still there, but it was manageable now, balanced by purpose and the familiar satisfaction of a complex puzzle finally beginning to make sense. I need 12 hours, Carmen said. 12 hours to get the federal searches started and build enough evidence that someone will listen. Maya looked out the window at the dark sedan still waiting in the parking lot. Then I guess I better make sure they keep me alive that long. Maya ended the call and stared at the dark sedan through her motel window. 12 hours. She needed to buy Carmen 12 hours while walking directly into the machinery that had consumed 20 other women. But now she understood that machinery. Dr. Vance wasn't some unhinged predator. She was a methodical researcher who had weaponized decades of psychological study. That knowledge was both terrifying and oddly comforting. Researchers followed protocols. They documented processes. They believed in their own systems so completely that they rarely considered those systems might be turned against them. Maya had built her career dismantling financial structures that their creators thought were impregnable. This was just another kind of forensic accounting. She pulled out the flip phone and typed, "I'm ready to talk. But I want to meet Dr. Vance face to face first. No intermediaries." The response came within minutes. "Dr. Vance appreciates your reconsideration. She'll meet you in the lobby in 10 minutes. Maya spent those 10 minutes methodically preparing. She activated the GPS tracking on her real phone and set up automatic location updates to Carmen every hour. She enabled voice recording and tucked the phone deep into her backpack where it wouldn't be immediately obvious. She uploaded her final analysis of the Institute's funding structure to 3 different cloud servers, each with time-delayed delivery to Carmen and 2 other contacts. Most importantly, she changed her mindset. She wasn't Maya Rodriguez, desperate pregnant woman with no options. She was Maya Rodriguez, forensic investigator going undercover to gather evidence. The distinction mattered more than she'd expected. It gave her back a sense of agency she'd been missing for days. Dr. Vance was waiting in the motel lobby, elegant and composed despite the late hour. She wore the same professional outfit from their cafe meeting, but now Maya noticed details she'd missed before. Expensive shoes that could handle rough terrain, a handbag large enough for restraints or sedatives, the practiced way her eyes catalogued Maya's emotional state and physical positioning. "I'm glad you decided to be reasonable," Dr. Vance said. "I know this feels frightening, but I promise you're making the right choice." Maya forced her shoulders to slump, channeling the exhaustion and defeat she'd genuinely felt an hour earlier. "I don't have anywhere else to go, but I need to know what I'm agreeing to. Where exactly are you taking me?" "A residential facility about 40 minutes from here. Private, comfortable, staffed with medical professionals who specialize in high-risk pregnancies." Dr. Vance's voice carried the smooth authority of someone accustomed to being trusted. "You'll have your own room, nutritious meals, prenatal care, everything you need to ensure a healthy delivery. And after delivery? We'll discuss your options then. Adoption services if you're interested. Job placement assistance. Whatever helps you build a stable life." Dr. Vance gestured toward the door. "But let's focus on getting you somewhere safe tonight. You look exhausted." Maya let herself be guided to the sedan, noting the driver's face and license plate number. Michael Chen sat behind the wheel, offering her a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Another detail she'd missed earlier, His hands showed calluses inconsistent with office work, manual labor, possibly restraint training. "There's water and snacks in the seat pocket if you need them," Dr. Vance said as Maya settled into the back seat. "It's a bit of a drive, but try to rest. Tomorrow will be a big day." Maya accepted the water bottle gratefully, though she didn't drink from it. Instead, she leaned against the window and let her breathing slow, feigning sleep while staying alert to their route. They headed north on Interstate 17, past the sprawling edges of Phoenix and into the desert darkness beyond. The conversation between Dr. Vance and Michael was conducted in low voices, but Maya caught fragments. References to the new wing being ready, someone named Dr. Patterson expecting them. Logistics about processing that made Maya's skin crawl, but also complaints about budget constraints and staffing challenges. The mundane concerns of people running what they considered a legitimate operation. After 30 minutes, they exited onto a smaller highway, then turned onto an unmarked road that led deeper into the desert. No streetlights here, just headlights carving through absolute darkness. Maya opened her eyes enough to glimpse their surroundings, rocky terrain punctuated by sparse vegetation, the kind of isolated landscape where screams wouldn't carry and bodies might never be found, but also where buildings would be visible from aircraft, where vehicles would leave trackable heat signatures, where the kinds of federal surveillance Carmen was arranging would have clear sight lines. The facility, when it appeared, was nothing like the sinister compound Maya had imagined. It looked like an upscale medical retreat, low, modern buildings arranged around a central courtyard, professional landscaping, warm lights in windows that suggested comfort rather than confinement. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Dr. Vance said, noticing Maya's attention. "Dr. Whitmore designed it himself. He understood that healing requires an environment that feels safe and nurturing." Maya nodded, but she was thinking about something else entirely. Dr. Whitmore had designed this place in the 1990s, when the disappearances started. Which meant there were architectural plans somewhere, building permits, contractor records, paper trails that even careful predators couldn't completely erase. As they pulled up to the main entrance, Maya's phone vibrated with Carmen's first location update confirmation. 43 miles north of Phoenix, GPS coordinates locked and transmitted. The countdown had begun. Maya's legs felt unsteady as she stepped out of the sedan, but she forced herself to move with the slow, defeated shuffle they'd expect from a broken, pregnant woman. The facility's entrance gleamed under warm lighting, all glass and polished stone, like stepping into an expensive spa rather than what she now understood was a sophisticated killing machine. Dr. Vance placed a gentle hand on Maya's elbow, guiding her toward the double doors. "The intake process is quite simple. Just some basic paperwork, a medical evaluation to ensure you and the baby are healthy, then we'll get you settled in your room." Maya nodded mutely, while her forensic mind catalogued every detail. Security cameras positioned to capture faces, but angled away from the parking area where vehicles would arrive. Keycard readers on interior doors suggesting compartmentalized access. Most telling of all, no visible signage identifying the facility's purpose or management. For a legitimate medical center, it was remarkably anonymous. The lobby continued the spa aesthetic with muted earth tones and comfortable seating, but Maya noticed the furniture was heavier than necessary, positioned to limit movement patterns. The reception desk faced the entrance with clear sightlines, but sat behind what looked like reinforced glass, professional, calming, and designed for complete control. "Maya Rodriguez," Dr. Vance announced to the receptionist, a middle-aged woman whose smile seemed genuine. "We discussed her arrival earlier." "Of course. Room 14 is ready." The woman handed Maya a clipboard. Just some basic information. Contact details, medical history, emergency contacts. "Take your time." Maya's hand trembled only slightly as she accepted the clipboard. This was the moment she'd been preparing for, the final test of everything she'd learned about both forensic investigation and psychological manipulation. She needed to appear compliant while gathering intelligence, vulnerable while maintaining inner strength. The forms were more detailed than she'd expected. Financial information, employment history, family relationships, psychological state assessments disguised as medical questions. It was a comprehensive psychological profile designed to map every vulnerability, every pressure point that could be used for control. Maya filled it out carefully, providing information that painted her as isolated and desperate while omitting details that might reveal her investigative background or current support network. As she wrote, Maya listened to the sounds around her. Quiet conversations from staff members, the hum of medical equipment, footsteps on polished floors. But beneath the surface calm, she detected something else, an underlying tension, like a theater company maintaining character even during intermission. All finished? Dr. Vance reviewed the clipboard with professional efficiency. Excellent. Dr. Patterson is waiting to conduct your medical evaluation. She's been working with expectant mothers for over 15 years. You'll be in wonderful hands. They walked down a hallway lined with landscape photographs and motivational quotes about strength and healing. Maya counted door numbers and noted emergency exits while maintaining the glazed expression of someone too exhausted to process her surroundings. Her phone vibrated against her back. Another GPS update transmitted successfully. Dr. Patterson's examination room looked exactly like any other medical facility, complete with examination table, ultrasound equipment, and walls covered with prenatal development charts. Dr. Patterson herself was a petite woman with graying hair and kind eyes that seemed genuinely concerned about Maya's welfare. "How are you feeling, dear? Dr. Vance mentioned you've been under considerable stress lately." Dr. Patterson's hands were gentle as she checked Maya's blood pressure and heart rate. "Stress isn't good for you or the baby, but we're going to take excellent care of both of you." Maya submitted to the examination while studying Dr. Patterson's movements, looking for signs of deception or threat, but the doctor's concern seemed authentic, her medical procedures completely standard. Either she was an exceptional actress, or she genuinely believed she was helping vulnerable women. "The baby's heartbeat sounds strong," Dr. Patterson said, moving the ultrasound wand across Maya's belly. "About 12 weeks along, I'd estimate. Have you been taking prenatal vitamins?" When I could afford them, Maya answered honestly, watching Dr. Patterson's face for reactions. "We'll get you started on a proper regimen immediately. Nutrition is crucial during the first trimester." Dr. Patterson made notes on a chart, her expression professionally compassionate. "Dr. Vance tells me you've been having housing difficulties?" Maya nodded, letting genuine emotion creep into her voice. "I lost my apartment. I've been staying in motels when I could afford them, my car when I couldn't. That must have been terrifying. But you're safe now. We have extensive experience helping women in crisis situations rebuild their lives." Dr. Patterson finished her examination and helped Maya sit up. "I'd like to start you on some nutritional supplements and a mild prenatal vitamin. You're slightly underweight, and your stress levels are concerning." She handed Maya 2 pills and a cup of water. Maya accepted them without hesitation. Whatever drugs they might use later, they wouldn't waste them on supplements during a routine medical exam. She was still too valuable as a research subject to sedate immediately. "Dr. Vance will show you to your room now," Dr. Patterson continued. "Rest is the most important thing you can do right now. Tomorrow we'll discuss long-term plans for your care." Maya stood slowly, maintaining her cover while her mind raced with analysis. Whatever was happening here, at least some of the staff seemed to believe they were engaged in legitimate social work. Dr. Patterson's care felt genuine, her medical protocols standard, which meant Dr. Vance had built something truly insidious, a system where good people unknowingly participated in activities they would be horrified to understand. As she followed Dr. Vance back into the hallway, Maya's phone vibrated again. Carmen would have her location, Dr. Patterson's medical assessment, and Maya's initial observations of the facility's layout. The countdown continued, but now Maya was inside their system. The real investigation could finally begin. Dr. Vance's composure cracked for just an instant when her phone buzzed with an urgent message. Maya caught the micro-expression, a flicker of alarm quickly masked by professional calm. "There's been a small scheduling change," Dr. Vance said, her voice still smooth but with an edge Maya hadn't heard before. "We'll need to expedite your orientation process." They walked faster now, past the cheerful landscape photographs toward a section of the facility Maya hadn't seen yet. The hallway grew quieter, the warm lighting giving way to harsh fluorescence. Dr. Patterson's genuine kindness felt very far away. "Where are we going?" Maya asked, letting uncertainty bleed into her voice while her investigative mind catalogued every detail: fire exits, room numbers, the subtle shift from medical center to something more institutional. Just a different wing, more private. Dr. Vance's smile had become brittle. "Some of our residents prefer the quiet." Maya's phone vibrated against her back. Carmen's location tracking was still working, but for how much longer? They'd entered an area where cell towers might not reach, where federal surveillance would have limited visibility. The hallway ended at a heavy door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Dr. Vance used her keycard, and Maya heard the unmistakable sound of multiple locks disengaging. Beyond was another corridor, this one lined with doors that looked more like prison cells than patient rooms. Dr. Vance. Maya stopped walking, her heart hammering but her voice steady. "I want to leave." "I'm afraid that's not possible anymore." Dr. Vance turned to face her, and for the first time Maya saw her without the mask. Cold intelligence, predatory patience, the absolute conviction of someone who had never been successfully challenged. "You see, Maya, we know exactly who you are." Maya's forensic training kicked in even as terror flooded her system. "Stay calm, gather information, look for weaknesses. I'm nobody, just a pregnant woman with nowhere else to go. You're Maya Rodriguez, former forensic accountant for Chen and Associates. You're the woman who's been investigating disappearances connected to our research program. You're also carrying genetic markers that make your pregnancy extremely valuable to our work." Dr. Vance produced a tablet, swiping through what looked like medical files. "Did you really think we wouldn't notice someone systematically accessing missing persons reports, tracking our funding sources, building a case against us?" Maya's mind raced through possibilities and escape routes, but the corridor offered no options. They'd planned this perfectly, drawn her deep enough into the facility that screaming wouldn't help, isolated enough that her phone's GPS signal was probably already failing. "The women in those storage units," Maya said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "What did you do to them?" "We advanced human understanding of maternal psychology under extreme stress. Their contributions to science were invaluable." Dr. Vance's clinical tone made the words more horrifying than any angry confession. "But they were uncontrolled subjects, random selections. You, however, represent something much more promising." She gestured to one of the cell doors. "A subject who has willingly placed herself in a survival scenario while carrying a genetically optimal pregnancy. The stress responses we'll be able to document, the psychological breaking points we can map. It's unprecedented research opportunity." Maya understood now why Dr. Patterson and the other staff seemed genuine in their care. They thought they were running a legitimate facility while Dr. Vance conducted her experiments in hidden wings they'd never see. "How many others are in there?" Maya nodded toward the locked doors. "Currently, 3. But don't worry, you won't be sharing space. Contamination between subjects would compromise the data." Maya's phone vibrated one final time, then went silent. Carmen's tracking had been severed, but not before transmitting hours of GPS coordinates. Federal agents would know exactly where to look, but they needed time to mobilize resources and obtain warrants. Time Maya might not have. "There's something you should know," Maya said as Dr. Vance approached with restraints. "I didn't come here alone." Dr. Vance paused. "Your friend Carmen? We've been monitoring her communications for days. She thinks she's building a federal case, but our contacts in law enforcement have been quite helpful in misdirecting her efforts. Maya's heart sank, but her forensic mind caught something important in Dr. Vance's phrasing. "You've been monitoring her for days, which means you knew I was investigating you before tonight." "Of course." "Then this whole elaborate setup was unnecessary. You could have taken me from the motel." Maya's voice grew stronger as the pieces fell into place. "Unless you needed me to come here willingly, to walk into your facility under my own power, because kidnapping leaves evidence trails that even corrupt cops can't completely erase." Dr. Vance's expression shifted slightly. Maya pressed her advantage, "Which means you're not as untouchable as you think you are." The confrontation Maya had been dreading her entire life, facing a predator with nowhere to run, had finally arrived. But she was no longer the terrified pregnant woman from the motel. She was a forensic accountant who had just identified a critical weakness in her opponent's methodology. "You're right," Dr. Vance said, her clinical mask slipping further. "We do have limitations, but you've already served your primary purpose by coming here voluntarily. Everything else is just bonus data collection." Maya's forensic mind worked frantically as Dr. Vance moved closer with the restraints. The facility's elaborate facade, the genuine medical staff, the careful staging of her recruitment, it all pointed to an operation constrained by legal vulnerabilities, not one with unlimited power. "The other women," Maya said, backing against the corridor wall. "The ones currently here, they came voluntarily too, didn't they? Because you can't risk the federal attention that missing persons cases bring anymore." "Very good. Your analytical skills are exactly why you're so valuable." Dr. Vance's voice carried grudging admiration. The 1990s were a simpler time. Less digital surveillance, fewer interconnected databases, but modern law enforcement requires us to be more creative in our recruitment methods. Maya felt her phone's weight against her back, silent now, but having transmitted everything Carmen needed. The federal response might take hours, but it would come. The question was whether Maya could survive long enough to see it. "You want to study maternal psychology under extreme stress," Maya said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "But you need baseline measurements first. Controlled data before you can introduce variables." Dr. Vance stopped advancing, intrigued despite herself. "Continue." "Which means you need me functional and responsive for days, maybe weeks, before the real experiments begin." Maya straightened, drawing on every lesson her grandmother had taught her about surviving impossible situations. "Time I can use to document everything you're doing here." "Document for whom?" "Your communications are severed. Your location is isolated. Even if federal agents eventually arrive, they'll find a legitimate medical facility treating vulnerable women." Maya smiled, feeling a strange calm settle over her. She'd spent her entire life running from confrontations, avoiding risks, choosing safety over truth. But standing in this corridor with her unborn child depending on her, she finally understood what her grandmother had tried to teach her about the difference between survival and surrender. "They'll find a facility where the lead researcher admitted to murdering pregnant women for psychological experiments," Maya said clearly. "Where GPS tracking shows a federal informant was lured under false pretenses, where financial records will reveal funding sources that can't stand scrutiny. There are no recording devices here, no witnesses. There's me." Maya placed her hand protectively over her belly. "And there's my child. You want to study maternal psychology under stress? You've just created a subject who knows exactly what you're planning, who has every reason to resist, and who has training in evidence preservation and documentation." Dr. Vance's expression shifted as she grasped the implications. A cooperative victim was one thing, but a forensic accountant with investigative skills and nothing left to lose was something else entirely. "You can't fight us indefinitely," Dr. Vance said, but uncertainty had crept into her voice. "Even if you resist initially, we have methods." "And I have methods too." Maya's voice grew stronger. 20 years of experience in uncovering financial fraud, documenting criminal conspiracies, building federal cases that destroy people who thought they were untouchable. You want me as a research subject? You'll get exactly that. A subject who spends every conscious moment analyzing your operation's vulnerabilities and finding ways to expose them. The corridor fell silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Maya could see Dr. Vance recalculating, weighing the value of a non-compliant subject against the risks of keeping someone with her skills alive and aware. "There are other women," Dr. Vance said finally, "other subjects who would be far less problematic, but none with my genetic markers. None who walked into your perfect psychological scenario." Maya pressed her advantage, understanding that her investigative background had become both her greatest vulnerability and her only weapon. "You spent months setting this up, monitoring me, planning the perfect recruitment. You can't just throw that away and start over." Dr. Vance stood frozen, the restraint still in her hands, but her conviction wavering. Maya realized she'd reached the moment her grandmother had prepared her for, the point where running was no longer possible, where survival required standing firm and accepting the cost. "So here's what's going to happen," Maya continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent years confronting white-collar criminals. "You're going to put me in whatever cell you've prepared. I'm going to document every aspect of your operation from the inside. And when federal agents arrive, and they will arrive, I'm going to provide them with evidence that destroys not just you, but everyone who's enabled this." The sacrifice had been made the moment she'd decided to come here, Maya realized. Not her life, not her child's future, but her safety, her careful, controlled existence, her ability to avoid hard truths and dangerous confrontations. She'd given up the luxury of staying uninvolved, and in return, she'd found the strength to fight back. Dr. Vance's hands trembled almost imperceptibly as she lowered the restraints. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, broken only by the harsh buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. Maya watched the calculations play across the doctor's face. Risk versus reward, control versus chaos, the terrible arithmetic of someone whose careful system had just been compromised by its own design. "You think you understand what's happening here," Dr. Vance said finally, but her clinical authority had fractured. "You think your federal friends will arrive like cavalry in some heroic rescue, but you have no idea how deep this goes, how many people benefit from our work remaining undisturbed." Maya felt her heart hammering against her ribs, but kept her voice level. "Then explain it to me. You clearly need me to understand something, or you would have sedated me the moment I walked through your door." The admission hung in the air between them. Dr. Vance's eyes widened slightly as she realized what she'd revealed, that Maya's consciousness, her ability to comprehend and respond, was integral to whatever they had planned. Not just a research subject, but a participant whose awareness was part of the experiment itself. 23 years, Dr. Vance whispered, more to herself than to Maya. 23 years of careful research, of building something that could finally answer fundamental questions about human resilience and maternal instinct. And you want to destroy it for what? Some misguided sense of justice? Maya studied the woman before her, seeing not just a predator, but someone whose entire identity had become wrapped around justifying the unjustifiable. The same psychological mechanisms that allowed white-collar criminals to rationalize billion-dollar frauds while maintaining their self-image as ethical people. "Those women you killed," Maya said softly. "Do you even remember their names?" Something flickered across Dr. Vance's face, not guilt, but something more dangerous. Pride. Jennifer Martinez, Lisa Chen, Rebecca Thompson, Sandra Williams, Maria Santos. Each name came out crisp and clear. Brilliant women, strong women, each one taught us something irreplaceable about the limits of human endurance and the power of maternal love. Maya's forensic mind catalogued each name while horror flooded her system. Dr. Vance didn't see victims, she saw data points, research contributions. In her mind, she'd elevated murder to scientific methodology and convinced herself it was noble. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the main corridor. Dr. Vance's head snapped toward the sound, her composure cracking further. "Dr. Vance," a voice called out. "Dr. Patterson," Maya realized. "I have the updated lab results you requested. Is everything all right back there?" Maya saw her chance in Dr. Vance's moment of distraction. Not to escape. The corridor offered nowhere to run, but to force the choice she'd been building toward. "Dr. Patterson," Maya called out, her voice carrying clearly down the hallway. "I need help." Dr. Vance lunged forward with the restraints, but Maya had positioned herself strategically. She stumbled backward, her shoulder hitting the fire alarm mounted on the corridor wall. The piercing shriek of the alarm system filled the air. Emergency lights began flashing, and somewhere in the distance, Maya heard the mechanical thud of security doors automatically unlocking. "What's happening?" Dr. Patterson's voice was closer now, tinged with genuine concern and confusion. "Code Yellow!" Dr. Vance shouted over the alarm, falling back on institutional protocols even as her experiment collapsed around her. "Return to your station immediately." But Maya could hear uncertainty in Dr. Patterson's response, the hesitation of someone whose medical instincts were warring with administrative commands. The facade was crumbling, the careful separation between legitimate staff and hidden operations breaking down under the pressure of an actual emergency. Maya pressed her back against the wall, watching Dr. Vance's face cycle through rage, calculation, and something that might have been desperation. 23 years of research, months of careful planning to acquire Maya specifically, and now federal agents would arrive to find a facility in full alarm with emergency protocols activated. "You have no idea what you've just destroyed," Dr. Vance said, but her voice carried the hollow ring of someone whose certainty had finally shattered. "I know exactly what I've destroyed," Maya replied, feeling her grandmother's strength flowing through her words. "I've destroyed your ability to hurt anyone else, to take vulnerable women and turn their desperation into your scientific curiosity, to convince yourself that murder is research." The fire alarm continued its relentless shriek, and Maya could hear multiple voices now in the main corridor, staff members responding to emergency protocols, asking questions, demanding explanations that Dr. Vance couldn't provide without revealing what this wing of the facility actually contained. Maya placed both hands protectively over her belly, feeling her child's life pulsing beneath her palms. She'd walked into this place prepared to sacrifice her safety for the truth. Instead, she'd discovered something more powerful than sacrifice, the strength that came from refusing to remain silent, from choosing to fight back even when the odds seemed impossible. The confrontation was over. The resolution had begun. The facility's emergency lights cast everything in hellish red as federal agents flooded through the main entrance 47 minutes later. Maya sat in Dr. Patterson's office, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of industrial disinfectant, watching through the window as FBI vehicles lined the parking lot like a small army. Her hands hadn't stopped shaking since Dr. Vance had been led away in restraints, still insisting her research would have revolutionized maternal psychology. Carmen burst through the door before the agent escorting her could announce their arrival. "Maya, Jesus Christ, when your GPS cut out, I thought..." She stopped mid-sentence, taking in Maya's appearance. The torn clothes, the exhaustion, the way Maya instinctively kept one hand pressed protectively over her belly. "Are you hurt? Is the baby..." "We're okay." Maya's voice came out rough from shouting over the alarm system. "Shaken up, but okay." Carmen's embrace was fierce and careful at the same time, the kind of hug that said she'd been preparing herself for much worse news. Over Carmen's shoulder, Maya could see Agent Torres coordinating with a crime scene team, their equipment cases spreading across the reception area like they were setting up for a long excavation. "3 women," Maya said when Carmen finally released her. They found 3 other women in the hidden wing, all pregnant, all convinced they were receiving legitimate medical care, all alive. Maya nodded, though the memory of their confused faces as FBI medics had led them to safety would stay with her for a long time. Women who'd been so desperate for help that they'd voluntarily entered a nightmare, trusting a system that had failed them long before Dr. Vance had found them. Dr. Patterson appeared in the doorway, still wearing scrubs but looking like she'd aged 10 years in the past hour. "Maya, I need you to know that I had no idea what she was doing back there. None of the legitimate staff did. We thought those were administrative offices, storage areas for old equipment." "I know." Maya studied the doctor's face, seeing the genuine horror and guilt warring with professional obligation. "You couldn't have known. That was the point of the whole setup." Through the window, Maya watched as investigators wheeled out boxes of evidence. Financial records, research files, the carefully documented horror of Dr. Vance's decades-long project. Her forensic mind automatically catalogued the chain of evidence procedures, the methodical dismantling of a criminal enterprise that had hidden in plain sight. Agent Torres knocked on the doorframe. "Ms. Rodriguez, we'll need a full statement when you're ready, but there's someone here who's been asking to see you." Maya looked up, confused, as Torres stepped aside to reveal a woman in her 60s with graying hair and kind eyes. She wore a simple business suit and carried a leather briefcase that looked like it had seen years of courtroom battles. "Maya Rodriguez?" The woman extended her hand. "I'm Sarah Chen, from the Justice Department's Victim Advocacy Office. I've been following your case since Agent Torres first contacted us about the storage unit discoveries." Maya shook the offered hand, still confused. "I don't understand. The women whose identities you found in that storage unit, their families have been looking for answers for over 20 years. What you uncovered tonight isn't just about stopping future crimes. It's about finally giving those families the truth they've been searching for." Sarah pulled a folder from her briefcase and sat down across from Maya. "Jennifer Martinez had a daughter who was 2 when she disappeared. Lisa Chen was my sister-in-law. Rebecca Thompson's mother never stopped believing she was still alive somewhere." Maya felt tears she'd been holding back finally surface. All those names, all those driver's licenses and newspaper clippings, they weren't just evidence anymore. They were people with families who had spent decades wondering, hoping, grieving without closure. "Because of your investigation, we'll finally be able to give them answers," Sarah continued. "To tell them their daughters and sisters and mothers didn't just vanish, that their lives mattered, that someone fought to uncover the truth." Maya looked down at her hands, still trembling slightly from adrenaline and exhaustion. 3 months ago, she'd been a warehouse worker living paycheck to paycheck, terrified of confrontation, convinced that staying invisible was the same as staying safe. Now she sat surrounded by federal agents and victim advocates, having dismantled a criminal conspiracy that had operated for decades. "What happens now?" Maya asked. Carmen squeezed her shoulder. "Now you get to go home, rest, take care of yourself and that baby. The FBI has everything they need to build their case." Maya tried to picture it. The motel room with its thin walls and broken air conditioning unit seemed like it belonged to a different person's life. She couldn't go back to hiding, to accepting that vulnerable people like her were expendable. The woman who had walked into this facility no longer existed. Agent Torres returned with discharge paperwork and a business card. "Your statement can wait until tomorrow. But Ms. Rodriguez, what you did tonight saved lives. Not just the women we found here, but all the ones who would have come after." Maya stood slowly, one hand supporting her back, feeling her daughter shift and kick as if responding to the change in position. Walking toward the exit, past crime scene tape and evidence boxes, she realized she wasn't just returning to her world. She was returning to remake it entirely. The new beginning. 6 months later, Maya stood in the doorway of her new office, watching the morning light filter through clean windows onto a desk that actually belonged to her. The placard beside the door read Maya Rodriguez, Victim Advocate Specialist, in crisp black lettering, and she still felt a small thrill of disbelief every time she saw it. The Justice Department building in downtown Phoenix hummed with purposeful energy around her. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, the steady rhythm of people working to hold systems accountable. Her daughter kicked against her ribs. a familiar reminder that Maya was now 36 weeks pregnant and running out of time to tie up loose ends before maternity leave. She'd named her Sofia after her grandmother, though she suspected Sofia Rodriguez would be far braver than either of her predecessors had ever imagined possible. Maya? Sarah Chen appeared beside her, carrying 2 cups of the herbal tea that had become their morning ritual. The Martinez family just called. Jennifer's daughter wants to meet you next week, before Sofia arrives. Maya accepted the tea gratefully, her free hand automatically moving to support her lower back. Jennifer Martinez, 24 years old when she vanished, leaving behind a 2-year-old daughter who was now 26 and finally had answers about what happened to her mother. Maya had spoken with dozens of family members over the past months, but each conversation still felt like sacred ground. How is she handling everything? Better than expected, she said, knowing the truth. Even this truth is better than 24 years of wondering if her mother abandoned her. Sarah's voice carried the weight of someone who understood that particular pain intimately. Dr. Vance's conviction helped. Seeing her sentenced to life without parole gave a lot of families closure they never thought they'd get. Maya settled into her desk chair, a real ergonomic chair that supported her pregnancy rather than making her back ache, and opened her laptop. Her current caseload included 14 families affected by Dr. Vance's research project, but her work had expanded beyond that single investigation. Vulnerable women went missing every day, fell through cracks in systems designed to protect them, disappeared into statistical anonymity. Maya had become someone who made sure they weren't forgotten. Carmen knocked on the office doorframe, grinning as she held up a coffee cup that read, "World's Best Aunt-to-Be." She'd been promoted to lead detective on a federal task force investigating medical facilities that preyed on desperate patients, and her new confidence showed in everything from her posture to her willingness to interrupt Maya's workday with social visits. "Please tell me you're not planning to work through contractions when labor starts," Carmen said, settling into the visitor's chair. "Because I've already told the hospital staff to expect a woman who thinks she can solve cases from her delivery room." Maya laughed, feeling Sophia's shift in response to the sound. "I'm officially done with active cases as of Friday. Sarah's taking over my open files, and Dr. Patterson agreed to consult on the medical facility inspections while I'm on leave." Dr. Patterson had become an unexpected ally, using her experience with Dr. Vance's deception to help identify red flags in other facilities. The guilt she carried about missing the signs had transformed into fierce determination to prevent other medical professionals from being used as unwitting cover for criminal operations. "And after maternity leave?" Carmen asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer. Maya looked out her window at the Phoenix skyline, the same city where she'd lost her apartment and bid on a storage unit in desperate hope of finding something valuable to sell. The woman who had pried up those floorboards felt like someone from a different lifetime, though Maya could still access her strength when needed. "I've been thinking about law school," Maya said quietly. "Part-time program, evening classes. The Justice Department has a scholarship program for victims advocates who want to become prosecutors." Carmen's smile was brilliant. "Your grandmother would be proud." Maya felt the familiar tightness in her throat that came whenever someone mentioned her grandmother's pride. Elena Rodriguez had died, believing her granddaughter was too afraid of conflict to fight for anything meaningful. She'd never seen Maya dismantle a criminal conspiracy, never watched her testify before Congress about gaps in victim protection services, never witnessed the moment Maya had chosen truth over safety and discovered she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. But Maya carried her grandmother's lessons every day now. The difference between survival and surrender, between hiding from hard truths and facing them with courage. Those lessons had been waiting inside her all along, dormant until the moment she'd needed them most. Sophia gave another strong kick, and Maya smiled as she placed both hands over her belly. "Your great-grandmother was right about a lot of things," she said softly, "but she was wrong about me being too scared to fight. I just hadn't found something worth fighting for yet." The afternoon sun streamed through her office window as Maya returned to her work, surrounded by case files that represented real people whose stories mattered, whose disappearances wouldn't be allowed to fade into silence. She'd found her fight, and she was just getting started.